we have done as facilitators is we clean the vessel and learned how to listen to the medicine and get the fuck out of the way in terms of what we think, so that we can receive messages what to do and when from ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is the conductor of the concert, for lack of a better term, and the facilitator is the instrument. So the more finely tuned, the more training the facilitator has, or the shaman has, the more finely tuned the instrument, and the cleaner the sound, and the sound being the medicine itself, will come out. And the more resonant the space will feel.
What is up, Superior Nation? You're currently listening to Zach Poitra. He's a modern day shaman. He gives ayahuasca retreats, and it's a crazy job. I think it's phenomenal that he's been able to do this with his life and find meaning in this spiritual retreat and spiritual ceremony. I think it's an amazing service that he provides for people that are looking for those spiritual journeys, and it's different. And today is basically a 101 about ayahuasca and how she helps people purify themselves. And this excerpt that I'm getting ready to read is from his ebook, which you can go to ayahuascafamily.com and sign up for their email list, and they'll send it to you via email. He says, I would say that one of the most differentiating aspects of ayahuasca is her ability to go into the physical body and bring forth emotion and trauma to the surface such that it can be released. Science is gaining more and more evidence that we as humans hold past experiences, emotions, and trauma in our physical body through tension. This is often the source of our anxiety, depression, PTSD, confusion, and in some cases, physical ailments. Guys, this is a crazy episode. I hope you guys listen to the entire thing because it's so interesting to me. So let's get this thing started. Let's get after it.
Hi, this is Zach Poitra, and this is Your Superior Self.
Spiritual experiences are not planned. They happen. Their content and their message happen as well. They are spontaneous, non-ordinary experiences, and they happen in non-ordinary brain and consciousness states. When they happen, the brain operates in unusual domains of frequency, either at the very low end of the EEG scale or at the very high end, either in alpha or theta or at the gamma range. These states permit elements of experience that are ordinarily submersed in the sea of everyday concerns to surface to consciousness. The elements that surface in non-ordinary states of consciousness may carry important insights. Among other things, they may tell us something about our connection to the source, to the information that shapes our lives and our very being on this planet. And that excerpt was taken from the book Reconnecting to the Source by Ervin Laszlo. And the reason why I'm laughing is because my wife texted me and she was like, "What are you doing? You read that excerpt like 10 times so she can hear me in the other room." But I want to get it right. I mean, spiritual experiences are pretty insane and not ordinary. So it's like, I don't want to mix words, and I want to get it right. And it's something that I don't fully understand. I mean, I just learned about ayahuasca ceremonies through this interview with Zach, and I want to get it to the point where you can understand it and what it's about, because I didn't understand what it was about at first. And through my conversations with Zach and some of the research that I've done on the side, I'm not an expert, but I kind of have a foundation about what the experience brings and some of the different types of, traditions and cultures that use ayahuasca in their ceremonies and kind of the idea behind it. And I think it's very interesting, to say the least. So I hope you consider this like the 101 on ayahuasca, and I hope that I do a fairly good job of making that intro for you with Zach. A little bit about Zach. In 2009, he started drinking ayahuasca, and he was actually in the finance industry, and he was depressed, and he wasn't happy, and he was looking for a different outlet, I guess, and he found ayahuasca, and that opened up a ton of different doors for him, and he kind of found his calling. and he tells a little bit about his story here, and it's very, I mean, again, all of this is interesting. I don't know what other word to use. It's very interesting. I'm still learning about it, like I said, and I hope that you guys are open-minded about it, and I hope that for some of those who are dancing with the idea of psychedelics or plant-based medicines to help you alter your state of consciousness, to experience some of these journeys for yourself, these cleansing ceremonies, I think it's a good opportunity. It's something that's different, and be open-minded to it. That's all I ask. So without further ado, here is my interview, my conversation with the shaman, Zach Poitra. Zach, I want to say thanks for hanging out today, man.
Yeah, thank you. And really honored to be on this podcast. I looked through some of your previous guests, and it's funny, Paul Selig was on that list, and I was literally listening to Paul Selig when I saw that. So I was like, weird. Whoa. Yeah, weird, or and I think Paul Selig would say there's, or not. So the guides would say there's no coincidence.
I love Paul. He's such a great dude, man. Have you ever spoken with him?
Not directly. Certainly, like I said, books and stuff on YouTube. And I've always been really skeptical of channels. And the way I kind of got pointed in his direction was through listening to Duncan Trussell and then Aubrey Marcus and going, okay, these guys, they're pretty discerning in terms of their who they listen to and who they look at and so forth. And so I started checking Paul Selig out and found him to be, as a person, I found him to be one of the best representations of a channel of spirit, because he doesn't make himself special. And then, of course, what's coming through is very consistent with teachings, older teachings, Buddhism, Christianity, and so forth, at their essence, and what I would say truth, but that's an opinion, of course. I found what he was saying to be very congruent with those other teachings, and so I was like, okay, this is significant, and have started to study him in more depth. And that the idea that he has of being just the vessel and the channel plays right into my wife and I's perspective and view on what we do in ayahuasca ceremonies. We are just the channel for ayahuasca and other plant medicines that we have formed a relationship with. So it's an interesting connection, and we might be jumping ahead in the conversation on that.
No worries, man. No, we can do whatever you want, go wherever you want to go. But Paul he's such a genuine guy too. Like, he is like authentic. Like, you send him an email, he sends you one right back, and he's very open to the idea of you hanging out and coming to some of his meetings or whatever, not conferences, but like his like
workshops.
Workshops. Yeah, he was in Maryland, and he invited me to come hang out, and I unfortunately couldn't make it. But I mean, he's just so genuine, and the crazy part is like how he channels. It's like he goes into a room, he has a witness, a transcriber, and in one take they knock out sections of a book, and it's pretty crazy. Because I mean, if you think about it, a lot of the doubters and the naysayers are like, oh, that's it's just Paul. It's him saying those things, and it's like, but you can't go in there one time and knock out half of a book or a full book in one sitting, right? Like, even Paul says, I can't do that. Like, there's been times where I've had writer's block, and I can't sit in front of a computer and write an entire book. I mean, he's written so many, or channeled so many different books in one sitting. It's like, you know what I mean? It's just, it makes you really think about, what he's talking about, and really, it validates what he's saying. So let's talk about you. Okay. So we've had two. So you talked about ayahuasca, right? Like, so I'm just started to get a little bit into it as far as research and trying to understand a little bit of that. Like, it really intrigues me, right? Like, because of it's supposed, like, some people use it as a form of therapy, right? Like, to cleanse oneself.
Sure.
I don't know a lot about it, other than some people that I've talked to have tried it and they've experienced some crazy things, and maybe even things about going on the other side and experiencing the universe. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Okay, so you jumped around a little bit, and what you said, all of it is true. It is a plant medicine from the Amazon basin, and essentially Peru is best known for it in the West right now, but Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, Brazil, and Bolivia, a small part of Bolivia, it's all used in various ways, very, very different ways. Some in Peru predominantly it's used, they call it medicine, la medicina, and it's also used as a sacrament. So there's a couple of Brazilian churches, and one's the Santo Daime, and the other is the Neo de Vegetal, and there are also branches off those churches, and they're using it as a sacrament connection to they literally go to a Catholic church. I mean, they are a Catholic church, and they use it as a sacrament. My lineage is Peruvian. It's a mestizo lineage. Mestizo means it's mixed blood between indigenous and the Western influence. And there's a very rich, and this is something a lot of people don't realize, is around ayahuasca is you have the indigenous cultures, which were the originators of the usage of ayahuasca. Then you have the mestizos, which are the mixed blood people, who have also an incredibly rich culture around ayahuasca and shamanism in general, using other plants and other types of shamanism as well. A lot of people think that ayahuasca or plant medicine is only practiced by indigenous tribes, and that's just not true. And I would actually put forth the idea that the indigenous aren't any better or worse than the mestizo. I kind of went off track there for a second.
No, but like, I don't mean to cut you off, but it's like,
sure.
Like when I was jumping around, like, I think that, I guess here in the States, like we've heard about it. Well, I don't want to speak for everybody. We're just now starting to hear about it, right? Because like Johns Hopkins is dedicating some research funding for it. Maybe not ayahuasca, but psychedelics, right? Like that type of therapy. And ayahuasca, like I listened to a lot of the same podcasts you had mentioned before, Aubrey Marcus, and he talks about his retreats down in Peru, and not necessarily, I haven't listened to any of his experiences, but I think there was one with Humble the Poet, and I can't remember which show he was on, but he was talking about his trip with ayahuasca, and it's like, I guess the only thing that I related to, and it's very ignorant of me because I don't know a whole lot about it, but it's like it's what you use if you want to experience God, right? Like that's what I associate it with.
You can't, again, that would be a sacramental use, but and that can happen, absolutely. And at the same time, before, just like any other spiritual path, there tends to be, particularly if you want to go on the mystical path, if you just want to go to church, that's pretty accessible, right? Anybody can do that. But if you want to go through the mystical path, whether it be through Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, shamanism, what have you, before there's a connection to God or a realization of God, there tends to be, not always, but there tends to be a purification process. That is cleaning out the blockages, the gunk that we have acquired through growing up and living in society, and our society is particularly gunky. So one of the big things and that's why we call it the medicine, is because ayahuasca is very unique in its ability to help clean out the energetic channels. Like if you look at the yogic or the nadi systems in the yoga system, or in Chinese medicines that are meridians, these are channels of energy that are not all that well known by science, although that's changing, particularly around acupuncture, because those open up those meridians. And so what ayahuasca does is on a physical level and through these energetic meridian channels is going through an opening and cleaning, such that the energetic system and the physical system is operating as it should, operating in balance. So if you're out of balance, or you have some channels that are clogged up, energetic or emotional channels that are clogged up, you're not going to, one, be healthy generally emotionally or mentally, and then may trickle down into the physical manifestation, right? So that's where she starts. She's cleaning all that stuff out. And once you get to a relative baseline of cleanliness, if you will, then you're open and you're actually having a direct relationship with ayahuasca, and she can take you then to have a relationship with however you want to call the word God, source, all there is, et cetera, the universe, et cetera, et cetera. So as long as we have those blockages in our way, it's going to be exceptionally difficult to have an experience of connection with the universe, God, source, or other people. Right. And this is what's interesting about, we were just talking about Paul Selig. Paul Selig's going, or not him, but the guides that he's channeling are going about it in a different way. But it's, I listen to him like, holy shit, this is very similar to plant medicine, and they work really well together. And I think this is something that we at La Familia Ayahuasca, our retreat center, we really take what might be called an integral approach. That is, we go. We love the plant medicines. We see huge value in it, but it's not the end-all, be-all. Let's hit it at a different angle with meditation. And for some people, maybe Paul Selig, or do some acupuncture, sound healing. Ayahuasca is both that cleaning and healing medicine. It is also a way to connect with God or source or the universe, and in which case it becomes a sacrament. And that's actually, I would say, a progression that we see. When one starts, if they have some past trauma, if they've used a lot of drugs and haven't resolved that drug usage, if they've been, I guess trauma would be the big thing. We need to adjust those energies, because when we go through trauma, we actually tighten up. Think about when you get scared. Trauma is fear. You actually physically tighten up, and we hold that trauma in our body, and those areas that are still tight are those energy channels that are blocked up, and there's a physical manifestation as well. And ayahuasca will open those up. Whether it be easy or challenging, sometimes it can be quite challenging for us to relax, go, oh shit, okay, let go. And because trauma creates that it's like holding your fist in a really tight fist for 2 hours. When you try to open that fist, it's going to hurt like a mother, right? And that's what's going on with the energetic channels in ayahuasca to varying degrees. Some people handle it more than others, handle it easier, more than others. And so that's the medicine part, is opening up, and then the teachings come once we get to a base level, and it can happen at the same time. So we can go through a bunch of purging, throwing up, releasing all the stuff that we've been holding on to, and have these visions of amazing quote unquote downloads, if you will, or lessons and so forth. She also, if I can just a second longer, she also works, one of the amazing things, and a lot of psychedelics do this too, in general, works on the subconscious. So when we have these experiences of like what we call Tibetan circus porn, we have these visions of like, what is going on? It's Tibetan circus porn. There's clowns and circus and it's like, I don't know, why the fuck am I seeing this? What's going on? And that's essentially her working on the subconscious level, stuff that we just don't, either we don't know about, but it is impacting our lives, or we can't handle the literal vision of what's going on there. If we did, we'd freak out. So she works on subconscious, which is great because we operate out of our entire consciousness, 95 if we're lucky, to 97% of our consciousness is subconscious. So we're actually, in our consciousness, we're working with 3 to 5%. And it's really hard for us to work on our subconscious because we're not aware of it. Mm-hmm. And she goes after that at the same time. That's so I went on not a tirade, but
you went on a nice plant medicine rant.
Yes, there we go.
How'd you get into this?
I was working in finance. I was an institutional stockbroker for 10 years.
Talk about a total 180, man.
Yeah.
Finance to plant medicine.
Exactly. Well, and the funny thing is, if I didn't have that finance background, I wouldn't have been able to afford to go do the proper training. It's expensive to do this, to train, because you have to literally go into the jungle. I was down in the jungle for 4.5 years straight, doing nothing else but dietas, shamanic dietas, which is another practice, and ayahuasca ceremonies. And so that's expensive and hard to do.
But what called you to what called it to you? Like your heritage, like your background.
Well, there is an interesting connection heritage-wise, in that I grew up a part of my life on the Lakota Sioux Reservation, the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. And my family, we were very involved in Lakota ceremonies, sweat lodge, healing ceremonies. I didn't go on Vision Quest, but my stepfather did. I didn't Sundance myself, but we'd go to Sundances, and my stepfather went to Sundance. So I was very exposed at an early age to this idea of medicine and spirituality, but not plant medicine. But fast forward, working in finance, pretty successful. I wouldn't say I was, I wasn't killing it relative to my peers, but I was right there in the middle. Nice and mediocre sales guy.
Comfortable, very comfortable.
Comfortable, exactly. I had everything that society said should make me happy on the exterior, and I was not. So I went through a period of dissatisfaction, and looking back, depression and anxiety. At the time, I didn't recognize that's what it was. I didn't go to a doctor, was never diagnosed as such. But now I understand that's what I was going through. And so I started looking around, and I started doing weekend workshops like Landmark Forum and doing some NLP stuff, and nothing really stuck. I did do a 10-day Vipassana retreat, which really that was a game changer, and that was before ayahuasca. Got me into a meditation practice, which helped. Then I read about ayahuasca, and as soon as I read, there's a National Geographic article. I think the author's name is Kyra Selleck. And I read that article, and she, as the author, actually went through an ayahuasca retreat. And she relayed her experience, and how, more importantly, I mean, the experience is one thing. The big thing with ayahuasca and doing work with this kind of plant medicine is what happens afterwards. How does it change your life afterwards? Otherwise, it's just an experience, right? Mm-hmm. How do we integrate it? How do we take those lessons, and how does it change our lives? Does it change our lives? And yeah, I went down to this retreat down in Peru, and wow. Actually, this is important for a lot of people to understand. The first night, nothing happened. And that happens, I've been doing this now for about 10 years, and I would say about 5% of the people don't have anything happen the first night. Mm. And then it's the medicine's kind of opening up those channels, greasing the grooves for the medicine to come in and hit. And then, boom. Second night, I was off to the races, and it was amazing. Visually, experientially, I worked through several issues with my parents' relationships. Also, just feeling more comfortable in my skin and relating to other people. I had a fair amount of social anxiety, and then when returning home, I felt connected. Suddenly work was not the awful thing that it was. It wasn't ideal. and I kept working in finance for a bit longer. And again, that's a couple of big deals came through, and I was sitting on a bunch of money, and I'm like, you know what? I can go down to Peru and just do a bunch of ayahuasca. And that was my plan, was to do about 5 or 6 months of personal work deep in the jungle. Moved to this small village out in the middle of nowhere, and found this group of shamans. And I was going to come home, and I had no intention of becoming a facilitator, shaman, maestro, what have you. And about 3 months in, my teacher, who I'd become really close with, he told me he had a dream. And he said, in that dream, we were in the jungle in front of a ceremony house, and there were thousands of gringos showing up to be served medicine. I was like, whoa, okay. Why is he telling me this dream? Is he asking me to work with him? And then that night we actually had an ayahuasca ceremony, and I was able to, that was my intention for the night, was ayahuasca. Am I supposed to be working with Maestro Gumercindo Galindo as my teacher? And is this my path? And she came through and was like, boom, yes, this is it. You're doing it. And this is your guy. And I don't think I expressed that I didn't want to do this. I did not. It scared the shit out of me. I saw what my teachers had to go through as part of the initiation process and training and so forth. It's really, really hard work. And I didn't want to do that. But the message was, all right, this is what you're going to do. And after that ceremony, I sat down with Gumercindo and his father, Don Roldan, both of which are maestros, masters. And I said, hey, this is what ayahuasca told me. And they're like, yep, let's do it. And so we built a camp in the jungle. That camp was in operation until mid-2014. It was called La Familia Medicina. And then mid-2014, I was like, okay, it's time for me to go out on my own. And with the blessings of my teacher, I had done enough training, and he gave me a title such that I could go out on my own. And I've been doing some quote-unquote underground work. And then in 2018, we moved to Guatemala such that we can kind of be more public. It's also close to the United States, close to our family, and an ideal place to do this kind of work. And so since July of 2018, we've been down here in Guatemala, and that brings us up to speed.
Yeah, because during our email conversation, I think it was your assistant or whoever. Yeah. They were like, you can't do it past 6 o'clock because the last boat back to the village leaves. I'm like, what?
What is going on? Yeah. I mean,
so you definitely immersed yourself in it, right? Like, I mean, you definitely committed.
Oh yeah. I mean, and again, if it weren't for my career in finance, there's no way I can do it. Could have done it rather, because I wouldn't have had the means to do it. And I overpaid or overspent in my education. My education cost at least $80,000 to $100,000, and that's part of that is because I built a camp. And when I left that camp with them.
So when you do that though, like when you say your education, like who do you seek out? Like, is there an organization? Is there somebody, a head shaman? Like, what does that look like? How do you get educated in this art?
It's tough. So I had to go down into Peru, into the jungle, and find quality shamans, which is really hard. I had a friend in Peru at that same time who was looking for a teacher. He wanted to study the medicine, and he kept changing teachers because he couldn't find one that he connected with, and there's a significant amount of alcoholism down there, which is ironic. That's a huge conversation. I understand why. But it's very common for shaman around the world, I think. I saw it on the Rosebud Reservation. Medicine men were also had a problem with alcohol, and it's very common in these indigenous societies or quasi-indigenous societies to have alcoholism to be very prevalent, and particularly for the healers, because the healers take on a lot of stuff and they're just trying to deal with it. And alcohol is one way that they think that works. It doesn't really. So anyway, back to your question. Yeah, it takes. You got to get lucky in finding a teacher that you can work with long term, and then really do the work. Essentially, it's very experiential. There isn't a quote unquote shamanism class when you go down to the jungle. It's you being there, doing the practices and doing ceremony, and really learning by watching and doing. Asking questions of teachers is tough. You kind of have to pull information out of them, and sometimes, for example, my teacher, I asked him why we don't eat pork, and he says, well, because it has the soul of the devil. And so, it's like, okay, and some answers are like that, and some I have to if the answer comes out like that and I really want to get deeper into it, I have to figure out another way to ask the question such that it can be communicated from him to me in his context of understanding, right? Because it's a very different culture. So it takes a long time, and it's unfortunate that a lot of Westerners who are doing ceremony, particularly up in the States, and I'm starting to see it even in retreat centers. They didn't get much training. They think, they've done, I don't know, 50 ceremonies or something like that, and they think that they can put on an ayahuasca ceremony because they're a good singer or musician or what have you. Unfortunately, I hope that those work out, but it's not what we agree with, and in fact. It's a nice little lead-in. Here in 2020, La Familia Ayahuasca, we're going to start a training program, an ayahuasca facilitator training program, which is going to be at a minimum 4 years, but most people are going to probably take 8 to 10 years to finish. 8 to 10 years? Yeah, because unless someone can come down and just bang it out, so to speak. It's going to take, if you're doing part-time work, and this is something for those of you who are talking to facilitators and considering drinking ayahuasca with them, they'll often say, hey, yeah, I've been doing this work for 10 years, which in my case is what the case, but or I've been studying the medicine for 10 years. Like, well, okay, that's really impressive. So how much of that time were you with your teacher? How much time did you spend with your teacher? Oh, I would go back and forth to Peru. Oh, so how much time? Oh, about 2 weeks to a month every year. So that 10 years suddenly turns into 10 months of study.
So that's a red flag.
Yeah, well, it's a red flag in the sense that that person wasn't being completely forthright, right? I mean, so for example, someone asked me, I'll be like, yeah, I studied 4.5 years. I was in Peru the whole time. I had some vacations, heading home for like maybe a month or 2 weeks or a month. So the opposite situation where I was mostly in Peru, mostly doing the work. And then once that 4.5 years was done, then I went out on my own, and that's all I've done for the last 10 years. And so, excuse me. So in my case, in 10 years, I've got at least 1,200 ceremonies under my belt, and I don't even know, 100 shamanic dietas, and please don't quote me on that because I'd have to calculate it out. But those are the kind of questions that are more relevant. It's like, okay, so how many ceremonies have you done? How many ceremonies have you facilitated? How many shamanic dietas have you done? That sort of thing.
Because I was going to ask you, what questions should I be asking? Me, a guy from Baltimore, Maryland, who is very interested in this and who is he's becoming more spiritual than religious, right? Like, I want to experience the universe. I want to take that journey. I want to raise the bar as far as my spirituality. And I want to experience this just because, a lot of people have talked about it. Like, what questions should I be asking to get the genuine article of a shaman or a facilitator like yourself?
Right. So I actually have, excuse me, I have a free ebook on our website that goes through all of this. Excuse me. And yeah, I would first start with, well, what's important to you? So for example, you can go deep into the jungles of Peru, which for a lot of people is just not going to be close to comfortable. There needs to be a bit of discomfort, stretching the comfort zone and so forth. So the options are jungles of the Amazon, whether it be Peru, Brazil, Ecuador, what's have you. Then there's the mountains. Like in Peru, there's a very active ayahuasca culture in the mountains as well. Then you can start moving up in Costa Rica. They've actually got some luxury places. Guatemala, which is where we're at, we also there's starting to become an ayahuasca area for ourselves and some other facilitators and so forth. Then the other thing I'd look for is, do you want to deal with or work with pardon me, do you want to work with an indigenous shaman, which is going to be someone from deep in the jungle, has very little, may not even speak Spanish very well. And Spanish will be the second language. And there may be a gap in terms of how you can relate to those people or those shaman. Then there's mestizo, which is what I explained before. They're going to mostly speak Spanish. They're going to have a little more exposure to the West and Western culture. Then there are the gringo shamans like myself, who have gone through the training and have a good understanding of where you're coming from. And so kind of our pitch, for lack of a better term, is, yeah, we can talk to you and we can relate to you. That said, I didn't grow up, in all honesty, I did not grow up in that culture. So some of that I might miss out on. It's kind of a something lost, something gained situation, right? Then you have what we call yoga wasqueros, which are people who have very little training. They probably are really good, if any training at all. They probably are very good singers or musicians, but they just don't have that solid foundation in the traditional ways of doing ceremony. And they tend to have a very loose container. They don't have very many rules. They let you do whatever you want during their ceremonies. So that's kind of we're kind of going deeper and deeper into what to look for. So those are some big choices. Then if you decide, okay, I want to work with someone who has some significant training, then you start asking, like, okay, so what did your training look like? What was
exactly?
the
That's what I was going to ask. Like, did you have to give up did you have to sacrifice basically everything and immerse dive into the training, dive into it? Like, I mean, I think, in Asia, a lot of the training with some of the arts, martial arts and some of the spiritual stuff over there is like they are your master. You basically have to give up everything in order to be a teacher in this culture. Is that the same type of learning for you?
Similar, yeah. I mean, certainly sacrifice particularly the practice, which is an overlooked practice in the West because everyone's focused on ayahuasca. There's this practice called shamanic dieta, wherein we're forming a relationship with a tree or plant separate from ayahuasca. And this is essentially a purification practice where, it's tough. There are a lot of rules and regulations that you have to follow through on. One of them being no sex for periods of time. And the irony is that when you do this kind of plant medicine work, you get really horny because it cleans out all the channels and makes you very
geared up.
Plants you're geared up and plants are sexy. So yes, in a sense, although I would say there isn't a guru kind of situation. You have your teacher. You listen to your teacher as it relates to medicine. And in my personal experience, I was very free to, in terms of on the broader spiritual cosmovision, I was free to go down the Buddhist path and the yogic path and explore those things, versus just this plant medicine based vision. In mestizo culture, they're Catholic, so they mix Catholicism with shamanism with plant medicine.
That's crazy. Like going up and taking the Eucharist and taking a little dab of some plant-based medicine stuff, right? Like,
yeah, well, and that's okay. So that's what the Santo Daime, the Brazilian churches. They're full-on Catholic churches. They do that. You go up, and I've participated in I would say 20 of those ceremonies, and I dig them. The Santo Daime Church is awesome. Very different in terms of how the ceremonies run. They have masses and everyone's singing instead of just one person or a couple of people, shaman singing, and it's cool.
That's awesome. Like, I'd love to see that. Like, I'm Catholic, so like we don't have any ayahuasca up here during our mass.
Yeah, and what's interesting is the Santo Daime actually is legal in Oregon, California, and some other states. So it is a possibility for some people. You do
look that up. Google that.
Yeah, well, it's one of those situations where you kind of have to have an in to get in.
You just send me an email later and let me know who your points of contact are, and let me know, because I'm going to mass out in Oregon.
Yeah.
What was the hardest part of the training for you? Like, what was the hard? Was it like getting rid of the self? Was it like, cleansing yourself? Like, what was the hardest part of the training, the entire training for you, besides the financial stuff? Like, what was the hardest part?
Yeah. The hardest part, and this is a personal thing, as one starts to do the training, particularly when I opened up my first retreat center in Peru, La Familia Medicina, I was working alongside my teacher as a co-facilitator and watching people go through their processes and not having the skill at that time to separate what's going on with them. I mean, essentially, they're giving through their processes. They're letting go of a bunch of unwanted, unhelpful energies, and I was picking it up, and I would have to clean it up myself. That just sucked. I mean, both in ceremony and outside of ceremony, it would be impactful. Particularly if someone was working through a bunch of trauma and so forth, and I was just like picking it up and I feel like shit. So that was really, really hard, and it's something that, I think it depends on the person, but for me, it was something I had to learn, and now I'm much, very skillful at avoiding getting sucked into another person's energetic vortex / process.
So, but when you're in there helping them, like, what are you doing?
Yeah. So,
I know it's so like basic. Yeah. It's not even a basic question. It's just like me, you know what I mean? Like somebody who has no idea. Sure. I know that's so many different answers, but like, are you on ayahuasca when you're doing it, or do you have to be?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's kind of that's crazy. So you're on ayahuasca, or I shouldn't even say like you're on it. You're experiencing it.
We drink it. Yes, we drink it with everyone else, and it's important that we do so, because ayahuasca uses us as a delivery mechanism for more ayahuasca. So there's the physical drinking of ayahuasca. And then there's the ayahuasca and medicine that has, through training, has been built up in the facilitator's body, such that we're like a vibrating battery. Mm-hmm. And then when we drink ayahuasca, it makes that battery vibrate even more and higher. And then when we sing our icaros, our medicine songs, those icaros are carrying mechanisms to carry more medicine and then activate the medicine in the bodies of those who else has drunk it. And the shamanic dieta is also a part of that battery being charged with other trees and plants. And ayahuasca is the connector, and we'll say, okay, Zach, now you got to sing the oak tree Icaro. And by singing that oak tree Icaro, the medicine of the oak tree goes out via the vibrations of the song and gets delivered to the recipients in the space. So really all we have done as facilitators is we clean the vessel and learned how to listen to the medicine and get the fuck out of the way in terms of what we think, so that we can receive messages what to do and when from ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is the conductor of the concert, for lack of a better term, and the facilitator is the instrument. So the more finely tuned, the more training the facilitator has or the shaman has, the more finely tuned the instrument, and the cleaner the sound, and the sound being the medicine itself, will come out. And the more resonant the space will feel. If you got a shitty facilitator, it can go sideways, right? I mean, if they're clogged up with a bunch of if they haven't gone through if their instrument is not clean and tuned, they're not going to be able to play a very nice song.
So when they're experiencing their whatever they're vibrating or putting out there, do you experience that with them? Like,
well, we, as a facilitator, when you change spots from participant to facilitator, the experience changes significantly because your intention is very different. You're more concerned with others than yourself. At the same time, we have our own experience. And then ayahuasca will pop in and say, hey, go check on that person. Or, sing this Icaro, the song. Or, we need you to burn some incense over here, Palo Santo, what have you. And so it's we kind of flip back and forth in our experience. It's really funny. People are like, how the hell are you able to sit up there and sing and then get up and help people out? Because the person who's saying this is like, I can't move. How the hell do you do that? And what I tell them is, there's lots of times I will drink the medicine and be in ceremony with you, and it'll hit really, really hard. And I'm like, oh shit, there's no way, if anyone needs help, will I be able to get up and do it? And then someone will say help. And then ayahuasca lifts it, and I go over and I help them.
So when they say help, is it like because they're dealing with something internally, like they're dealing with all that shit, and then like they just need somebody there for support, or what? Like,
right. So we'll get a little esoteric on this one. So ayahuasca will bring energies, past experiences, traumas to the surface in varying ways. Sometimes it's like lots of intensity. Sometimes it's a literal re-experiencing of that trauma, what have you. And the suggestion is like, hey, it's always good to work through these things on your own. That's self-empowering. And sometimes you need help. And sometimes asking for help is what will allow the healing. Like, some people are like, I don't ask for help ever, right? They just suffer in silence. Sometimes that breaking down of that barrier, that wall of asking for help, is hugely empowering. And so when that happens, we go over to them, and we have kind of a protocol where we will sing directly to them and be very close, like their head will be right in front of us, and such that they're kind of in our aura. And we will sing an Icaro, which again is delivering energy and medicine to them through the vibrations of the Icaro. And it's through that it will help move, because what they're doing is they're releasing unwanted energy or unwanted experience. And so what we're doing through singing the Icaro is accelerating that process of moving that energy through. Western medicine tries to suppress and just quiet. No, we want to move it, and such that it clears the channels and opens. And it shocks me to this day that it works. Like it's called a ventiada, or some people call it limpieza. And so go over and do this work on them and finish the Icaro or the song and be like, you okay? Oh yeah, thank you so much. That's so much better. Oh, thank you. Like, holy shit, this works. So that's kind of the one of the first steps. At some point, if someone is really having a hard time and it's like too intense, we will literally suck. Oftentimes, what happens is it gets that energy. The medicine ayahuasca is simmering the body, and the energy is going up through the head and releasing through the head.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it gets stuck there. And then if it gets stuck there, then the experience is like loop, 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 loop. And it's just like, so it kind of gets a little crazy in the head, so to speak. And so we will also suck that energy out through the temples. And again, it's one of those things. It's like, it shocks me that it works. I'm like, what? Okay. So if the limpieza, the singing doesn't work, then we'll go in and we'll suck it out. And we can also, through the sucking, reduce the level of mareación. Mareación means feeling the effect. So if there's just like, oh, holy shit, I drank so much ayahuasca and I'm just losing we can suck that out and reduce it down to a more manageable level. We can't take you back down to 0. We'll take you from 120 down to 80 or 60. And such that it's like, okay, I'm better. I can handle what's going on now.
Mm. Like, since you've done it so many times now, have you built up like a tolerance to it, or is it just, like how does that work?
Well, ayahuasca is really interesting in the sense that it actually has a reverse tolerance.
Really?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's so if one is doing a series of ceremonies. Oh, and by the way, this as an aside, we really don't think doing one ceremony is appropriate for the first time. We think 3 to 5 in like a week is the best way to approach that. And we can circle back on that.
Explain real quick, and you can loop back around to this, but like explain a ceremony. Like how long is it, and like what does it entail?
Ceremony is going to last usually for our tradition, depends on the tradition, but our tradition, it starts at around sunset, lasts 5 to 7 hours. And at the end, the peak is generally, you start to generally front end loaded. That is about an hour in it hits, and that's for the next hour or so. It's the peak, and then it's normal to have some, kind of a lower level, but still significant experience for up to 12 hours. Everyone's different in terms of their tolerance and how long it lasts and so forth. So that's a general ceremony.
And that's like, so you have the retreat guru, right? Like that's your business, and you take people down and you facilitate these ceremonies. No. How's that?
We're La Familia Ayahuasca.
Okay.
Is the name of our retreat guru is a retreat marketplace where you can go and look and find what do you call it, yoga retreats. You can find all kinds of retreats on Retreat Guru. It's kind of a platform, and they also have a booking software which we actually use. But yeah, we're here down in Guatemala, Lake Atitlan, Guatemala, and we have 8 ceremonies a year, all during the dry season. So it's the best time of year to come down.
What's your website again?
The website is ayahuascafamily.com.
Okay, because I just searched your name and that's where it came up, the retreat guru, and it came up with you and your wife.
Sure.
But essentially, you guys bring people down and have ceremonies, right?
Exactly. We do 8-day, 7-night retreats that have 4 ayahuasca ceremonies, and then we have a Mayan fire ceremony, which doesn't involve any medicine. Some sound healing sessions. We fill the week up essentially, with the core being the 4 ayahuasca ceremonies.
So is your wife from down there, or is she from the States?
She's from the States.
How'd you get her to move down there?
Oh, she's all over it. She's a nomad. She's more of a nomad than I am. And part of the reason we moved down here, again, it's close to the United States. The weather is freaking perfect. It's like San Diego weather. You've got a couple of months of rain, but we don't do retreats during that time anyway. And close to the United States. We have a son, Bodhi, who's like 2 years old, so we wanted to be close to the United States. There aren't legal issues with ayahuasca here, so it's safe for us to be open. And it's just a wonderful environment to raise a child. The Lake Atitlan is kind of I would say, number 1 or 2 tourist destination in Guatemala. It's this beautiful lake surrounded by volcanoes, and it's just
gorgeous.
Gorgeous, yeah.
So, were you religious before you started doing ayahuasca and the ceremonies? Like when you first, like before you even started it, before you read the National Geographic article, like what was your religion?
Yeah, as I said, growing up, I was not baptized. I was not raised in the Judeo-Christian tradition at all. I obviously was aware of it.
Did you believe in a source? Did you believe in God?
Yeah, and that came from, I had a very wonderful experience on the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota with the Lakota Sioux. We were working with a medicine man, and we talked about God, and he and I just one-on-one. He said, "Look, all of it's God. All these religions have work with God, and it's just a different name. We call it, Lakota call it Great Spirit, or the Native Americans call it Great Spirit." So since then, I really took that to heart, and I actually had some really interesting experiences in Lakota Sioux ceremonies, wherein I saw spirit in healing ceremonies. Essentially, we were in a dark room with very high ceilings and saw flashes of light everywhere, and those flashes of light were not illuminating anything around. You couldn't see it wasn't like the light illuminated the wall or illuminated the room itself. It was just pure light, and they were popping around 20 feet in the air, right in front of me, next to me, all over the place, and that was my first experience with spirit.
How old were you?
I was at that time between the ages of 10 and 14, and it happened on various occasions. In fact, later in life, when I was 42 or so, I went to another Lakota Sioux ceremony. So this is kid, adult, and went to another ceremony, and same thing happened. And there were rattles that were moving around also. It was pretty nuts.
So now after all of this, where you stand now, all the education, all the ceremonies that you participated in and helped out with, like, what is your belief what is your belief now spiritually? And are you religious now, or is it just one source, everything is everything?
I would lean towards that non-dual one source, everything is everything. And I also understand that religion as an organization definitely has some hindrances, and it's appropriate for some people. Mm-hmm. It's helping them. Everyone's on a progression, a process, a path, and to judge the Catholic Church or the Christian Church or the people who are participating in it. It's just like what the guides tell Paul Selig. It's counterproductive. It doesn't help me to put myself above or think I'm above those people because they have a certain set of beliefs. Now, the actions of, say, killing on behalf of a religion, definitely don't agree with that. That's ridiculous. And not judging the essence of those people. Those are still divine beings, right? Mm-hmm. Their actions suck. And yet they're still divine beings.
Yeah, and I think people get confused with that, right? Like they hear divine beings, and like with Paul Selig and what he teaches, that we are from that source, so we are divine. Right. And a lot of people can't handle that because they think, with Jesus and they put them up higher than us, but we are right there with them, right? Like we're right there with the source of energy, the source of the creator. Like we are them. Like everything is a part of one source. Like, I believe that when we exit this world, when we shed these bodies and we go back to where it is that we came from, like I feel like instead of it being like the traditional heaven with white clouds and white robes, like we go back to this soul that is connected with so many others, and we bring our life experiences, and you have this choice of coming back, right? And getting, receiving what it is that you're meant to receive, right? Like, I don't know what we're meant to receive here. I think it's, in my opinion, I think it's some type of awareness, some type of awakening that you have consciously. And, I think that a lot of people can't handle that because it's just like they're so used to this fire and brimstone, and you have to live a perfect life in order to receive this reward. And it's kind of, I don't know. I think the journey is the reward, right?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, frankly, Christ, and I've had a lot of Christ experiences with ayahuasca, and have
really?
been, therefore, oh yeah, baptized.
I would love to hear that, because I talk about this all the time. Like, not with anybody on the show, but like personal conversations, like with people that I know have tried it. Like, have they experienced that? And they say yes, but they won't go in any details. Like, would you mind sharing some of that?
Sure. I've had a lot.
What's the most memorable? Like the
biggest one was ayahuasca saying, "Hey, accept Christ as your savior." And I was like, "What? That's not even." I tend to lean Buddhist, and she's like, "No, accept Christ as your savior." And so I said, "Yeah, okay, let's do it." And an amazing feeling of love coming over. I was then moved to baptism, being baptized, and Christ was there. I don't remember if he was actually the one who baptized me, but also,
have you seen Christ?
Oh yeah, he shows up a lot.
Is it the same guy? Like, is it the same face? Like, or is it like an image, or maybe like
it is, but I think that's because in that context, that's how I would recognize him as Christ. It's not that that's what he actually looks like. It's like, and there's also a feeling associated, an energetic feeling. Now I recognize it as an energetic feeling. I've also, through these experiences, figured out there's a differentiation between religion, what the Bible says, and what Christ taught. Mm-hmm. And if we just focus on what Christ taught, we're golden. And then when we start looking at the larger things in the Bible and start taking them literally, that's where it starts to go sideways. And then if we look at the dogma of the teachings of the whatever church it may be, it gets progressively sideways, so to speak.
So you need to read this book, and I'm going to make you promise me that you're going to read this book. But it's called the Dead Saints Chronicles: A Zen Journey Through the Christian Afterlife by Dave Solomon. I don't know if you ever heard of John Anthony West, who was an archaeologist that did a lot of work in Egypt. And actually, I learned from him. I not learned from him, but I heard about him through Graham Hancock, who's pretty popular here in the U.S. But I read this book, and essentially it's an account of like over 100 near-death experiences, and his experiences investigating these. And every single person that is discussed in the book has some type of interaction with Christ. And it's kind of the same thing. Like, you don't really have a description or a face, but you have that love, that feeling, that explosion of energy. Like, and they have this recognition inside of them that, hey, this is Jesus. Like, this is him. And it's like, it will blow your mind, some of these stories. And everything you were just talking about, like, I feel like it just came from that book. Like, it's crazy. You were talking about it, and that's why I just brought it up.
Sure.
I'd be interested in hearing what you had to say about that.
Yeah. Do me a favor, and you email me that information, and I'll email you back because you were wondering about the daime, and we'll see what we can do about that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, and at the same time, a lot of it, for example, in the Santo Daime, when I go to a church service they call them works, or what we would call ceremonies, they call work. When I go there, the experience is very much Christ, Mother Mary, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas when we do our ceremonies, we have my experience is a gamut of Christ, Buddha, Shiva, Ganesh, plant spirits, ayahuasca, all these different spirits. So it's a broader palette in our ceremonies. And then when I was in the jungle, it was more animals, plants, lead more that direction than so each ceremony context can be influenced is the best word, by the facilitators and the set and setting that you're putting forth. So yeah, it's interesting how different those experiences can be based on where you're doing the work with ayahuasca.
I love it. Zach, how can people connect with you?
Yeah, so our website is ayahuascafamily.com. And if they want to get in touch with me directly, it's info@ayahuascafamily.com. We also have podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud under Ayahuasca Family.
So you have your own podcast. Ayahuasca Family is the title of it.
And I think we've got 12 to 13 episodes.
And what do you talk about? Just ayahuasca, the experience?
Actually, try to go deeper than that because there's a fair amount of experience reports out there. We talk about, for example, I have a podcast with Daniel Moran, who has a podcast called Capitalism.com, and he did a couple of retreats with us, and we talked about Christianity and ayahuasca. He was actually studying to be a pastor, and instead of becoming a pastor, he became a capitalist or a entrepreneur, and
totally different direction.
Totally different direction. Funny, yeah. The irony. But anyway, so we during that I connected with him because of his background in Christianity, and I had a lot of questions about the Bible and so forth, and so we got together after one of the retreats and did this podcast specifically on Christianity, religion, ayahuasca, and money.
It's funny how they all tie together.
Yeah, indeed. And then we
how much does it cost to do a retreat with you guys?
With us, it's if you want to stay, it depends on your lodging. So a dorm room, very comfortable dorm room, is $1,425 for the whole week. Then if you want to get your own private casita with a shared bath, it's for a single one person in that queen bed would be $1,675. If you put two people in there, it goes down to $1,525. Obviously, that's per person. And then we've got one big private room with its own half bath. It goes anywhere from $1,750 for one person, or $1,625 per person for two people. So it's anywhere from $1,425 to $1,750, depending on your lodging situation. And then the menu, there's some upgrades beyond that, but they're not significant.
Yeah, that's awesome. This has been so intriguing to me. When it's all said and done with, when we're done, when we go back to the source, what do you want to be remembered for? What do you want your legacy to be?
Oh, I don't think it matters.
No.
No, I that's the, I think.
Well, what about your son? What's the biggest lesson that you want to teach him?
Oh, that we are at our essence all equal, and the meaning of life, quite possibly. I also have some Buddhist influence, so I won't say anything specifically. The meaning of life, quite possibly, is simply to help others in service, and that's it. And what society in general is telling us is not always true.
Absolutely. Fake news.
All Zach, the way around on both sides.
Yes, absolutely. I've been researching diets, right? I've just been toying with the notion of going to an all plant based diet. and
Did you watch Game Changers or something?
Yeah, I watched that and I started watching, what was it, The Magic Pill, and that was more so just getting rid of like the carbs and stuff like that, like processed stuff. And then I just happened to watch Game Changers, and I was like, whoa, that's insane. Like I never even heard of that before. And then I watched What the Health, which was in 2017. So I'm kind of like dabbling with it. Just, I don't know, man. It's just like when you talk to people about that, like when you talk to them about plant-based or meat and dairy-based, like it's so polarizing. Like people get so defensive of their diet choices. It's almost like talking to somebody about politics.
Yeah, totally. It's, and it's funny that I recently had an experience because my wife and I are definitely paleo. I actually operate really well on a keto diet, and that's what I'm currently doing. I wasn't while my wife was pregnant and recently breastfeeding, but just switched back over, and I feel great. And my wife is a nutritional therapist. She healed herself through nutrition. She had rheumatoid arthritis, still does actually, but it is in remission by her following essentially a paleo diet.
And what does she mostly eat though? Like, well, I mean, I don't know. Like,
definitely whole. So she eats whole foods, avoids grains. Mm-hmm. Definitely avoids gluten. Gluten puts her on her ass. I mean, she eats some gluten and she will be in bed for the whole day the next day. And we eat high quality meat. So we eat free range chicken. We eat grass-fed beef. We try to avoid farmed fish and that sort of thing. So,
here it's like it's so like a lot of it is the processed meat for us, right? Like the cows, the dairy, the cheese.
So all those studies that they point to on the vegan side or the vegetarian side, there has yet to be a study using non-processed, grass-fed, or free-range meats. And so until you tweak that, that makes the whole thing tainted in a way. Now, it's interesting you say about the polarization, because when someone tries to tell me how to eat food, I feel like I'm being proselytized by a born-again Christian. It's that same energy, that same vibration.
I know. They get so pissed, man. It's like I put something out there, like, oh, that's bullshit science. Like, I mean, okay, I get it. Like you just said, they don't have like a study to saying, all right, let's get some cows that have been, no chemicals, no antibiotics, no nothing, free range. Even like deer, wild deer near us.
Absolutely. Like, if you can do that, that's great.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then like, Joe Rogan's a big elk eater, right? Like he hunts the elk, and those things are so lean in meat. I mean, they're so pure, man. It's not like food around here in dairy where even the pigs, right? Like, I mean, I know they're the devil down there, but up here a lot of people eat pigs up here, and it's like,
I love pork, by the way. I don't eat it. I love it.
But it's just,
but what people, it's what happens is it's just like born again Christians. You get these people who are eating standard American diets. They switch over to a whole food plant-based diet. They feel great, and they think everyone else should do it. What they don't realize, and I think this goes to both sides, the paleo diet is not for everyone either. Mm-hmm. Some people will be optimal or run optimally on a plant-based diet. Some people will operate optimally on a keto diet. Some people will operate optimally on a paleo diet. It's our responsibility to figure it out, just like a spiritual path. That's why there's Buddhism. That's why there's Hinduism. That's why there's Christianity and varying degrees of Christianity, is figuring out what path works for you, man. And don't fucking worry about anyone else other than blessing them. Wishing them the best.
I love it. Service and find what works for you.
Exactly.
I love it. Zach, man, this has been fucking awesome, dude. Cool. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. And anytime.
I want to say thank you to Zach for hanging out today and just schooling us on ayahuasca and the ceremonies that are associated with that. Thank you guys for downloading. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you for being open-minded. I do appreciate that. And if you want to find me on social media, you can do that. I'm on Facebook at Trey Downs. Instagram, tdowns80, and Twitter at downstray. Check me out. Follow me. Let me know what you guys are up to, especially nowadays with everything that's going on with the quarantines and social distancing. Let's connect. Let's make our community stronger. Let's reach out. Let's support each other. Let's be more positive. Let's be open to the experience that is amongst us right now. All right, guys. This has been a fun one for me. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please leave a rating and a review wherever you get your podcast from. It helps me scale the show. And you guys can go to yourspareyourself.com and leave me a message. Let me know how you guys are making out. If you guys need any toilet paper or water. All right, guys. Later. I'll talk to you.